I went to San Giovanni Rotondo, and I can assure you that Padre Pio is an honest friar, humble. He is the first to be sorry for what is happening.
Ever heard of Padre Pio? He was one of the most revered saints in Christian history, but before his death, Padre Pio claimed to have received a strange message that could change the course of history. What exactly did he see? What's the meaning of Pio's mystical vision? Join us as we unravel the message Saint Pio received on his deathbed. Number 1. The young Padre. Padre Pio's biological name was Francesco Forgione. He later became Padre Pio after joining the Frere. Francesco was born on the 25th of May, 1887. His parents were Grazio Mario Forgione and Maria Giuseppa D'Annunzio. Padre didn't start his journey with God when he became an adult. He wasn't forced to dedicate his life to the Lord. Instead, Padre dedicated his entire life to God when he was just 5 years old. When he shared his dream of becoming a monk with his parent, they didn't object but supported him. This happened after he listened to a young Capuchin seeking donations. On the 6th of January 1903, at age 15, Padre entered the novitiate of the Capuchin friars at Morcone. On the 22nd of January, he took the Franciscan habit and the name Pio in honor of Pope Pius I, whose relic is preserved in the Santa Anna Chapel in Pietrelcina. He took the simple vows of poverty, chastity, and obedience. Since then, his life has been characterized by extended devotion and holiness. Padre Pio's letters to his spiritual mentors offer a glimpse into his profound union with God. They reveal the immense mental and physical pain he endured, his abiding love for Our Dear Lady and the dear Eucharist, and most importantly, his profound union with God. We can all aspire to this deep connection in our spiritual journeys. Padre Pio's spectacular Mass celebrations, which frequently lasted up to 3 hours and embodied a profound spiritual immersion, were the pinnacle of his daily existence and the source of his spiritual strength. He got up at 3 in the morning and spent the time in prayer and meditation, getting ready spiritually for the Holy Mass. When it was time to preside over the Mass, Padre Pio was fully committed to enacting the Passion of Christ and acutely conscious of the solemnity of his position. He was known to cry during the service, exhibiting a spectrum of emotions from somberness to radiance. His emotional attachment to his duty was evident. Also, his profound dedication occasionally showed itself as tremors in his body and quiet tears, depicting the depth of his relationship with God. Padre Pio's Mass ceremonies were not just a series of rituals for him. Each element was approached with deep contemplation, from the consecration to the rubrics. He assigned a specific meaning to each gesture, bringing genuine emotion to the liturgy. This meticulous approach to the Mass reflected his profound dedication to his faith. His precise pronunciation of every word, particularly during the consecration, demonstrated how deeply important it was to him. He frequently took extra time to venerate the consecrated bread and wine, demonstrating his genuine respect for sacred objects. Saint Pio lived through the chaos and animosity of 2 world wars, witnessing humanity's faults. Even in the face of such hardship, his devotion to the Mass remained constant, bringing him closer to Calvary and a meeting with Jesus Christ, our Lord. As a devoted devotee of the Virgin Mary, Padre Pio prayed a lot and drew courage from the Rosary daily. He incorporated his love for Mary into his everyday prayers, saying the Rosary whenever he could. The Rosary was a big part of his life, either in his hands or within easy reach. One of the Capuchins who helped him noticed that Padre Pio always made he had one hand on his Rosary while washing his hands. Thus, he demonstrated a keen dedication to this spiritual discipline. He once said, stressing the Rosary as a powerful weapon against the world's evils, that it was a mistake for anyone to believe they could get through life without the help of the Blessed Mother. Padre Pio slept with multiple rosaries under his pillow because he was so committed to praying the Rosary every day. He once frantically asked for someone to bring him his firearm because he couldn't find his rosaries. For Padre Pio, the Rosary was a deep act of love for his Heavenly Mother beyond simple recitation. His devotion to the Virgin Mary was profound. He relied on her during difficult times and fully believed in her ability to cure the body and the soul. He defended the Rosary's daily recitation because he believed that sincere and devoted prayer might result in miracles. Pio was a strong proponent of weekly confession, describing it as the soul's bath. Pio established 5 rules for spiritual growth, which included weekly confession, daily communion, spiritual reading, meditation, and frequent examination of one's conscience. We will discuss this in the latter part of the video. He taught his spiritual followers that suffering is a special sign of God's love, making you resemble his divine Son in his anguish in the desert and on the hill of Calvary. Pio had a harsh attitude towards vain women, stating, "Women who satisfy their vanity in their dress can never put on the life of Jesus Christ. Moreover, they even lose the ornaments of their soul as soon as this idol enters into their heart." That's how deep his love for righteousness and holiness was. Pio also held to strict rules concerning modesty and refused confession to women who did not wear skirts that extended a minimum of 8 inches past the knees. He posted a notice at the Church of St. Mary of All Graces entrance in San Giovanni Rotondo. The church is the house of God. It is forbidden for men to enter with bare arms or in shorts. It is forbidden for women to enter in trousers, without a veil on their head, in short clothing, low necklines, sleeveless or immodest dresses. As Pio grew older, he became increasingly distrustful of television. After the Second World War, his nephew wanted to open a movie house. Pio warned him to be careful about the kind of movies he would show. He told him not to contribute to the propagation of evil. And when he discovered that the Capuchins were now allowed to watch television in the 1960s, he was greatly displeased. His deep drive for holiness and righteousness must have been the main reason God found him worthy of receiving 2 great visions, which reveal profound truth and the root of his stigmata. Pio's life was full of supernatural happenings. He once claimed to have met Jesus and had many divine encounters, but the last one he had before he died was nothing short of unusual. How authentic is this so-called vision, containing a strange message? Could it be more mystical than divine? Number 2, Pedro's encounters with Jesus. Many are very much aware of Pedro's stigmata, the appearance of holes and blood on his hands and feet in 1918. However, Pedro had a vision of Jesus 5 years before this occurrence. In 1913, Padre Pio said that he saw the vision of Jesus on a Friday morning while he was still in bed. According to him, Jesus looked distressed and broken. This vision caused Padre Pio great pain. Jesus showed him diverse sins from all areas of life, including high-ranking priests. Some were shown celebrating Mass, while others were seen donning or taking off their sacred clothes. Padre Pio was moved to tears by this vision, and it gave him his whole attention. Jesus cried as he looked sorrowfully at those priests, expressing obvious dismay and deep anguish. He turned his back on the assembly of priests and called them butchers. This was due to their negligence of their priestly duties. Then Jesus spoke directly to Padre Pio, giving him a somber message. "My son, do not think that my agony was limited to 3 hours. Rather, it extends until the end of the world for the sake of those souls that I hold dearest." These statements emphasized the eternal character of Jesus' suffering for the benefit of humanity. Jesus continued by expressing his grief's intensity and emphasizing the importance of being alert during such crucial moments. He felt completely abandoned. He yearned for even the smallest act of compassion from other people. In the face of general indifference, the coldness and disregard of his followers compounded his pain as he beheld the small return of his unending love and the addition of ridicule and doubt to his name. Even though Padre Pio said he had seen other visions before this time, this was the first that was quite comprehensive, revealing the truth about the eternal nature of Jesus. After this vision, Padre Pio described another vision. He recounted that following a Mass, he saw a shadowy figure that resembled the one he had seen in his first vision. However, there was a difference. This figure had bleeding hands, feet, and sides. This apparition filled him with an unfathomable fear. He felt as though he was about to die, and he thought that would have happened if it weren't for supernatural intervention, which strengthened his spirit and kept it from breaking. As the vision faded, something supernatural happened. He discovered that blood was dripping from his own hands, feet, and sides. This was the genesis of Padre Pio's stigmata. However, not everyone believed this vision. Some thought that Padre Pio had faked his stigmata. It was so serious that the Vatican imposed severe sanctions on Pio in 1920. He was forbidden from saying Mass in public, blessing people, answering letters, showing his stigmata publicly, and communicating with Padre Benedetto, his spiritual director. The church authorities also decided that Pio be relocated to another convent in northern Italy. The local people threatened to riot, and the Vatican left him where he was. A second plan for removal was also changed. Nevertheless, from 1921 to 1922, he was prevented from publicly performing his priestly duties, such as hearing confessions and saying Mass. From 1924 to 1931, the Holy See made statements denying that the events in Pio's life were due to any divine cause. However, no medical doctor could ascertain the root of Pio's stigmata despite all these. Some even said that it has a sweet-smelling fragrance. Too bad you didn't get the chance to have a smell of it. Thus, the spiritual significance of Pio's stigmata remained rigid amidst diverse oppositions. But when Padre Pio was about to die, something strange happened. Many critics continued disapproving of Padre Pio's divine nature, but couldn't deny the miracles accompanying his priestly life. While many could attest to his miracles, he was best known as a spiritual father to many people. Through his wise and holy guidance, he directed them to live a life of faith and sacrifice. He did this mainly through 5 tenets. The first was weekly confessions. According to Pio, the bath of the soul is confession. He admonished souls not to avoid confession for longer than a week. According to him, even a spotless, empty room eventually accumulates dust. The next is daily communion. Of a truth, we don't have the right to approach God. However, Pio stated that it is one thing to approach the Blessed Sacrament while in a state of grave sin, and another to feel undeserving. God is the one inviting us. We should be humble and accept him with an open, loving, and repentant heart. The third lesson from Pio is to examine one's conscience daily. In Pio's words, every seasoned merchant monitors his profits or losses on each sale in the evening. He also completes the day's accounting to plan his actions for tomorrow. Thus, it is imperative to do a thorough, concise, and insightful assessment of conscience every night. The fourth is spiritual reading each day. According to Pio, you will become lost and cease to be yourself if you do not continue to learn. You'll grow helpless and terrified of everything. Spiritual reading can cause a person to change their direction and even convince those who are materialistic to walk the path of perfection. The last tenet is observing mental prayer twice daily. Pio said, if you find it difficult to meditate, keep practicing it. Don't give up if there are many distractions. Even if you have to be crucified, you will still benefit from practicing patience meditation. Choose how long to meditate and stay put until it is over. Why do you worry all the time? Because you are unable to meditate as often as you would like. While it is a tool for approaching God, meditation is not an end in and of itself. Half of meditation is achieved when you love God and your neighbor with all your heart and without holding back. This is the ultimate goal of meditation. Naturally, if you have much time, you should pray whenever you can. You should talk to God twice a day, 3 times a day, or even dedicate an entire half or full day to it. This is the relationship you must build. Thus, Pio had laid the right foundation for all his followers through his teaching. But then he was getting close to his last days. But what guarantees that the message he claimed to have received on his dying bed isn't born out of his frailed health and previous spiritual encounters? Number 3. Padre Pio's last days. As Pio grew older, his health kept deteriorating. A day after celebrating his 50th anniversary of getting the stigma, Pio began to feel extremely weak. He was supposed to take the solemn service for pilgrims the next day, but begged his superior to only observe a short mass. But this didn't happen. Why? Even though his superior had agreed to take the mass, many pilgrims compelled him to observe the solemn service. He and everyone else in attendance had no idea that this would be his last mass and that he would pass away shortly after. He fell asleep that night even weaker, and those around him realized he would not make it. Clutching his rosary, he muttered Hail Mary and confessed, renewing his Franciscan vows. On September 22, 1968, around 9 o'clock that evening, Padre Pio called Paulino via the intercom to come to his room. When Paulino went into his room, he discovered Padre Pio in bed and saw that his eyes were red with hot tears. He inquired about the time, and Paulino replied, wiping his tears with a handkerchief. When he was sure Pio was okay, he returned to his room. But then, Padre Pio summoned Paulino to his room 5 or 6 times that evening, requesting little necessities. And Paulino saw tears in Pio's eyes each time he entered the room. What makes the scene more scary to Paulino is that Pio addresses him as Don Paulino instead of the usual son or brother. He only uses the name Don Paulino whenever he wants to make him laugh. Around midnight, Padre Pio asked Padre Paulino if he would like to stay with him in his chamber, and the latter gladly agreed. Padre Pio desired Padre Paulino to sit directly next to his bed this evening, even though he typically sat in the armchair. He clasped Father Polino's hand firmly in his. Then, Padre Pio started to shake like a scared little kid. He was always asking to know the time every few minutes. Father Polino was uncertain about how to interpret it. It appeared as though he was scheduled to meet with someone. He remained close to Padre Pio while continuing to wipe the tears from his eyes. Just before dawn, Padre Pio asked Padre Polino if he had done a spiritual Father Mass. However, Polino replied that it was too soon to say Mass. "You'll celebrate Mass today on my behalf." Father Pio replied, "I say Mass every day for your intentions," Father Polino said, since he didn't understand what Pio meant. Padre Pio stated, "Today you will say Mass for my soul." Padre Polino thought the words were weird, but he didn't ask for an explanation. A moment later, Pio requested Polino hear his confession. Even though Padre Polino wasn't his regular confidant, he had heard his confession several times before, and this night was no exception. "If the Lord calls me today, I will ask the brothers to forgive me for all the trouble I have caused them, and I will ask my spiritual children to pray for my soul," Pio started. Though Padre Polino said, "If it is indeed near your death, I ask you for a last blessing for the brothers and all of your spiritual children. I assure you that there is no reason for concern, as you have a long time to live." Padre Pio responded, "I give them all my blessings, and I beg you to have the Superior bestow one final blessing on them on my behalf." Then, Padre Pio declared that he wanted to renounce his religious commitments. Padre Polino became alarmed upon hearing these remarks because, according to Capuchin tradition, religious profession vows are only renewed in death. It seemed that Padre Pio was organizing everything to the smallest detail. As Pio reaffirmed his poverty, obedience, and chastity vows, Padre Polino listened. He uttered, "I, Padre Pio of Petrena, make a vow and a promise to the all-powerful God, the Blessed Virgin Mary, our Holy Father, Saint Francis, all the saints, and you, Father, to uphold the rule of the Friars Minor, which Pope Honorius confirmed, throughout my life, and to live obediently, without possessions, and in chastity." In response, Padre Polino said, "On behalf of God, I promise you eternal life if you abide by this." Father Pio stated he was having trouble breathing in bed and wanted to get out. He asked, "Are there any stars in the sky tonight?" Padre Polino said, "The sky is full of stars tonight. Let's head over to the veranda to see," Padre Pio said. Due to his severe arthritis, Padre Pio walked in a stooped and bowed posture, as it was extremely uncomfortable for him to stand. He was mostly dependent on a wheelchair, but tonight, for some reason, he was able to stand up straight and move quickly and easily to the veranda without the need for assistance. He suddenly appeared to be 20 years old, even though he was 81. Padre Pio reached over and turned on the light as soon as he arrived at the veranda. That was so long ago that nobody could recall him doing it. Then, Padre Pio started to focus his attention on a specific spot on the veranda. Father Polino didn't understand what he was looking at, but he would eventually understand. He was staring at the precise spot where in a matter of hours, the Capuchins would bring his lifeless body. All of a sudden, Padre Pio started to feel quite sick. He wanted to return to his chamber but was too weak to move. Father Polino hurried to grab a wheelchair. Meanwhile, Padre Pio's face had completely lost color and was becoming weaker by the second. He started saying, "Jesus, Mary," over and over. His voice was becoming progressively fainter throughout. In less than 10 minutes, a doctor arrived and determined that Padre Pio was suffering from a severe attack of bronchial asthma. To relieve his difficult and laborious breathing, he gave him an injection and oxygen. The other Capuchins now occupied Father Pio's chamber. While the physicians were doing everything in their power to save his life, the Capuchins knelt beside Padre Pio. They prayed the Our Father, the Hail Mary, the prayer for a holy death, and the prayer to Saint Joseph, patron of the dying. Padre Pio was completely conscious of what was happening. He was sweating profusely, and his hands and feet were getting cold. The medics put an injection right into his heart after realizing he was experiencing a heart attack. He kept saying Jesus Mary while keeping his eyes closed. His lips formed the words toward the end, but he could make no sound, not even a murmur. At 2:30 in the morning, he opened his eyes for the last time and glanced at his beloved brothers. With his rosary, Padre Pio softly lowered his head and died. In 1971, Pope Paul VI, speaking to the superiors of the Capuchin order, said of Padre Pio, "What fame he had! How many followers from around the world? Why? Was it because he was a philosopher, a scholar, or because he had means at his disposal? No, it was because he said Mass humbly, heard confessions from morning until night, and was a marked representative of the stigmata of our Lord." He was truly a man of prayer and suffering. Pope John Paul II canonized Padre Pio on June 16, 2002, in one of the largest liturgies in the Vatican's history. San Giovanni Rotondo, where Saint Pio lives and is now buried, draws approximately 8 million pilgrims annually. Regarding annual visitors, it is second only to the shrine of Our Lady of Guadalupe in Mexico. Saint Pio's whole life might be summed up in the words of Saint Paul to the Colossians, "Now I rejoice in my sufferings for your sake, and in my flesh I complete what is lacking in Christ's afflictions for the sake of his body, that is, the Church." Just before you click off, did you know that Padre Pio was not just a priest but also performed miracles? Wouldn't it be worthwhile to review some of them? Number 4. Padre Pio's miracles. In 1919, San Giovanni Rotondo, a 14-year-old boy, experienced a miraculous healing. When he was only 4 years old, he caught typhus, which caused his back to become deformed. Once he confessed to Padre Pio, the priest touched him with his hands. When the boy stood up, the deformity in his back had disappeared. Also 1919, a gentleman from Foggia, Italy came to Padre Pio. The gentleman was 62 years old and was walking with not one but 2 canes. He suffered a terrible fall from a carriage, a fall that broke both his legs. With doctors unable to help him, he relied on those 2 canes for support. One day, after confessing himself to Padre Pio, the friar told him, "Stand up and go away. You have to throw away these canes." The man carried out the order and began to walk by himself. There was a gentleman whose left knee was swollen and in great pain for many days. The doctor told him the situation was very dire and prescribed to him a lengthy series of injections. Before beginning the treatment, the man went to confession to Padre Pio. He asked Padre Pio to pray for him. The man recounted, "When I left San Giovanni Rotondo that afternoon, the pain disappeared. I observed my knee and noted it was not swollen anymore. Both my legs were now normal. So I immediately ran to Padre Pio to thank him. He said, 'You do not have to thank me, but you have to thank God.'" In 1950, a man's mother-in-law was taken to a hospital for an operation. The mother-in-law had breast cancer. After the initial operation, it was necessary to operate on the right breast some months later. Unfortunately, due to the dissemination of the cancer cells in her body, the doctors informed her that she would not live more than 4 months. The man immediately went to Rotondo and waited for confession with Padre Pio. He asked Padre Pio to help his wife's mother and heal her. The man recounted, "Padre Pio sighed long twice and said, 'We have to pray, everybody has to pray, she will recover.' It happened. My mother-in-law recovered after her operation and she went by herself to San Giovanni Rotondo to thank Padre Pio, who smiling told her, 'Go in peace, my daughter, go in peace.' Instead of 4 months, his mother-in-law lived for 19 more years. A woman said, "In 1947, I was 38 years old and I had been suffering from cancer of the intestine. The cancer was found by X-ray and it was decided to operate. Before going to the hospital, I wanted to visit San Giovanni Rotondo to meet Padre Pio. My husband, daughter, and one of her friends took me to him. I desired to confess my sins to Padre Pio and to speak with him concerning my disease, but it was not possible to meet him. My husband told one of the friars about my problem. That friar was moved and promised to report everything to Padre Pio. In a short time, I was asked to go into the corridor of the convent where Padre Pio would pass. Padre Pio walked through the crowd but was only interested in me. He asked why I was so distraught and told me I was correct about the surgeon. After that, he encouraged me and said he'd pray to God for me. I was amazed. He did not know the surgeon who would operate, and nobody told him I was the right person to speak to in the crowd. Yet he appeared to know both the surgeon and me. I faced my operation with hope and with peace. The surgeon was the first one to speak of a miracle. He performed an appendectomy despite previous x-rays that showed cancer. The surgeon did not believe in God, but since then, he has put a crucifix in each room of the hospital. There was no evidence of cancer anymore. After this miracle and a short rest, I returned to San Giovanni Rotondo to meet with Padre Pio. The saintly friar was going to the sacristy when he suddenly stopped and smiled at me. He said, "What do you know? You have come back here." He gave me his hand to kiss, which I affectionately held in my hands. One of Padre Pio's miracles occurred in 1953 to a lady with abdomen problems. She had a medical checkup and x-rays because of pains in the abdomen she was experiencing. After some investigation, she learned that an immediate operation was necessary. A friend of the lady who knew of her problem suggested to her, "Write a letter to Padre Pio to ask for his prayers and help." The woman received an answer, and Padre Pio suggested she go to the hospital. He would pray for her there. She went to the hospital and again had a medical checkup and x-rays just before the operation. The same doctors were astonished to find she no longer had the serious illness anymore. After 40 years, the woman is still grateful to Padre Pio for his help. A priest brought his friend, a Jewish man named Lello Pegna, to visit Padre Pio in 1919. Pegna was completely blind in both eyes. The priest had brought him to Padre Pio, hoping his friend would be cured. Padre Pio told Pegna, "The Lord will not grant you the grace of physical sight unless you first receive sight for your soul. After you are baptized, then the Lord will give you your sight." A few months later, Pegna returned and was baptized despite the protests of his family. In the following months, his sight was fully restored. For the next 30 years, his sight remained perfect. Gemma Di Giorgio was a little girl when she visited Padre Pio. She was born blind without pupils in either eye. After she visited Padre Pio, she miraculously regained her sight. One truly miraculous factor about her healing was that while she could see, she still had no pupils. Saint Padre Pio's faith and confidence in God's healing power were unparalleled. He shows us all that the power of prayer can yield beautiful, miraculous results. He was a conduit of God's grace, love, and mercy. Thanks for watching this video. While you're still here, check out the other videos you see on your screen.